Welcome one and all this afternoon. This is a regular board meeting of the Board of Directors of the East Bay Regional Park District, March 1st, 2022, and we're beginning at 1:03. I would like to ask the clerk of the board to call the roll of the board.
Yes. Director Rosario.
Here.
Director Lang.
Here.
Director Waspy.
Here.
Director Eccles.
Present.
Director Corbett.
Here.
Director Wieskamp.
Here.
President Coffey.
Here.
General Manager Landreth.
Here.
Deputy General Manager Alvarez.
Here.
General Counsel Burgo.
Here.
AGM FSM CFO Ocker.
Present.
AGM Chief Chiobaro.
Present.
AGM Kelchner.
Here.
AGM Cook.
Present.
AGM Johnson.
Present.
And AGM O'Connor.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Director Wieskamp if she would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And Dr. Alvarez, would you lead us in the land acknowledgement this afternoon? Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you, Director Coffey. The East Bay Regional Park District headquarters is located within the Huichon territory on the unceded lands of the Ohlone Chochenyo-speaking peoples who have continuously lived upon this land since time immemorial. The lands now encompassed within the boundaries of the East Bay Regional Park District are the ancestral territory of the Ohlone, Bay Miwok, and Delta Yokut. Today's Ohlone, Bay Miwok, and Delta Yokut people are thriving, vital members of the Greater Bay Area community. They remain intrinsically connected to the land they have stewarded since time immemorial. So please join us in recognizing and honoring this land and their ancestors, elders, and descendants, and all other members of their communities.
Thank you very much, Anna. Today's meeting is held pursuant to the Brown Act as amended by AB 361. Board members and staff may participate via phone or video conferencing. This meeting is a hybrid of an in-person attendance with board members, designated staff, and members of the public. We are also providing live audio and video streaming and have provided the public the opportunity to submit written comments and call in for public comments for an item on the open agenda or on the consent calendar in order to call in and leave a voice message or email message. We'll move to approval of the agenda.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Yes, President Coffey. Director Rosario.
Aye.
Director Corbett.
Aye.
Director Eccles.
Aye.
Director Lane.
Aye.
Director Waspy.
Aye.
Director Wieskamp.
Aye.
And President Coffey.
Aye. The next item on our agenda is the public comment period. This is for public comment on items that are not on today's agenda. So I need to ask the clerk whether we have had requests for public comments submitted not on the agenda.
No, President Coffey, we have not had any
And,
requests.
and I haven't seen any emails circulated, so I guess we're at no public comment this time around,
Yes.
which means we will move to the consent calendar. I'm first supposed to ask if all the members of the board are comfortable with the procedures for the meeting. All right, thank you. So business before the board, item 1 is the consent calendar. Do we have items that we need to pull for discussion or separate vote?
President Coffey, all the questions that Director Rosario had have been answered. Director Wieskamp has her hands up.
Director Wieskamp,
Comment, not a question.
please.
Okay. I want to congratulate the foundation in what could have been the worst period on earth. They have done better than ever. And I'd like to think it's because all those hordes of people who are coming to our parks and overwhelming them really appreciate the fact that they're there. Congratulations. Extraordinarily well. Congratulations.
Indeed, they have. Thank you. Any other board comments? Any comments from management? And I take it, Madam Clerk, we do not have public comment on any consent items that has been submitted. So
I'm glad to make the motion on the consent calendar.
thank you. Director Corbett has moved approval of the consent calendar. Is there a second? Director Lane seconds. Madam Clerk, please call the roll for approval of the consent calendar.
Vice President Coffee, Director Rosario,
Aye.
Director Eccles,
Aye.
Director Wasti,
Aye.
Director Lane,
Aye.
Director, Corbett,
Aye.
Director Wieskamp,
Aye.
President Coffee.
Aye.
Thank you.
So we're on a roll, folks. This is this is proceeding very well. Let's keep it. I was going to keep us motivated. We move to item 2, Executive and Legislative Division. The first public hearing on consideration of the East Bay Regional Park District Ward redistricting and review of draft maps to be presented by our government affairs folks who are with us by Zoom today. Is that right? Eric or Lisa?
Yes, we are here. I had just placed a phone call to our consultant, who is not appeared to be on the Zoom at the moment. So if you bear with us just a few minutes, we'll try to reach her and get her on.
We can do that. What I want to do, though, is make clear what we will first do is open a public hearing. Why don't I do this? I've always wanted to use this. All right. I got to use this. So we have opened a public hearing on the redistricting maps, and we will hear from staff consisting of Eric, Lisa, and or our consultant with presentation of 2 maps. One is labeled minimal change and the other is labeled cities. And we'll ask our folks to explain what the distinction is. I've come to just think of them as A and B. A being minimal, B meaning a greater attention to cohesion of cities. So those will be the 2 maps that we're presented with today as information only. After the staff presentation, we'll come back to the board for board comments and questions. And then we will turn to any public comment and listen to all public comment, come back to final comments from the board, and then move on to the next agenda item. Again, this is not an action item, but we will close the public hearing before moving on to another agenda item. So Eric, I've been attempting to kill some time, probably not all that effectively.
Yes, thank you for that. And we're hearing that the hearing should not begin prior to the time on the agenda and notice. So I guess it's maybe a question for legal counsel.
You mean because we were doing so well, we're early?
Yeah, and I also understand, I understand there is some urgency to go through the item as well.
Yes, there is. Are we really bound by our time estimates, council?
I think that having put that time frame on there, we probably don't want to proceed it because the public may not be joining the meeting on this item until that time.
So the concern is someone would have looked at this agenda at home and decided not to join us till around 1:50
Correct.
because that was our prediction.
And we're not required to put times on the agenda, but having done so, I do recommend that we potentially take a recess
Well, and the particular concern here is we have a legal obligation to hold a public hearing as opposed to just take up another agenda item as we do in the usual course of our business. So given that, I would
You certainly
understand.
could move, rearrange the agenda to take another item and use that. If you'd like to do board comments, have the general manager give her report, you have discretion to, for items that are not public hearings, you can have discretion to move it.
All right, if we do that, we may lose a board member, by the way, for that item. But I think you're telling me we're stuck. Director Corbett?
Just have a quick question. Is that the time on the agenda, is that on all the public agendas? Because I know in the past, we have started when we were ready to start the item and not looked at the time. So is this on the public or is this on the board members' agendas? We probably should take a look at figuring out how to make this work better for the future.
Director Corbett, this is Clerk Knight. Those times are on all of the agendas. So,
Including the public ones.
yes, they've always been the same.
I don't remember having this conversation about when we start though. Thank you.
No problem taking the other items, but I am cognizant of one of our colleagues having a time constraint. And unfortunately, I think we're just stuck on that point because of the legal need to have a formal public hearing. But I do get to use the gavel again, so that'll be good. That'll be a consolation prize. Let's move then to board and staff reports, and then we'll move to Brenda Montano's presentation, because I think we'll need to cover both of those to get up to 1:50. And that was the proposed starting time for that public
Okay,
hearing.
but at the same time, we're leaving the public hearing open while we are talking about other items.
Well, I don't think you want to close the public hearing, you want to postpone it and.
We'll postpone and come back to it.
Yeah.
So you're suggesting I won't be able to use the gavel again? Okay.
Board and staff reports has a time next to it as well at 2:13 p.m.
Yeah, but that isn't a legally required hearing. So we're
Gotcha.
comfortable moving ahead on that one. And you know, we will look at this, Director Corbett, to figure out a means of trying to finesse
It is a
time estimates. So let's move to board and staff reports. Item 3A, actions taken by other jurisdictions affecting the Park District. General Manager.
Great. Thank you, President Coffey. We're just one update on other jurisdictions. There's a lot going on in all of our 33 cities and 2 counties, but we have just one update today on the action taken by the Hayward City Council. And that is on February 15th, the Hayward City Council overturned a previous Planning Commission denial of the U-Haul development at 4150 Point Eden Way. Just as some context here, the San Francisco Bay Trail is located on the eastern edge of the eastern portion of this project site. The proposed project includes a land swap with the Park District to relocate the Bay Trail from its current location along the eastern property line to a new alignment that will meander along the southern property line and then turn north to run along the site's western property line. So we will be actively engaged with the applicant and the city on this. Certainly the decision to overturn the Planning Commission's denial of the project by the City Council will require Park District coordination for the land transfer and maintenance of the proposed Bay Trail alignment and the open space wetland preserve area. So we will keep you posted as that project progresses, as the City Council has now overturned the Planning Commission. And that is it for my update from other jurisdictions.
Director Lane has a question.
So do we have a choice in swapping the land?
I do not know that answer, and there's Brian Holt jumping on the screen. Go ahead, Brian.
Good afternoon, Director Lane and Board of Directors. My name is Brian Holt, Chief of Planning, Trails, and GIS. Yes, of course, no land transfer can occur without the board's approval. The applicant was notified of that. So they had been working to come up with a proposal prior to approval, but it still has to go through our internal process and go to the board to authorize that transfer. And the intent, I should add, the intent of that transfer was to get a better bay trail in that area. There's certain improvements that have been proposed. So we'll continue to be discussing those, and we'll be presenting hopefully what will be, something beneficial to the Park District when it comes forward.
Director Lane?
So it does talk about our sending 3 comment letters on this. Did the council listen to that, or did the Planning Commission listen to it?
Well, certainly our comment letters were concerns regarding the Bay Trail, concerns about sea level rise, and concerns about some of the historic resources there. So that was all part of the conversation that was included in there. We never took a position on the project in terms of support or deny. We just asked them to consider our trail interests in the area and the other environmental concerns that we had. And that was certainly part of the conversation. And like I say, we'll continue to be part of the conversation about how this project can enhance the Bay Trail experience in that area.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Any other board comments or questions on the general manager's report on other jurisdictions? None. We will move to item 4, general manager's comments, which are being delegated today to Archives Programs Supervisor Brenda Montano, who will present Olmsted's legacy in California and its connection to the East Bay and the opportunities for the Park District to participate in a national park program. Thank you, Brenda.
Members of the board and President Coffey, that right here did. Microphone. Thank you. I'll start again. Hello, members of the board, general manager, and everyone else here, and President Coffey. Thank you for having me. My name is Brenda Montano. I'm the Archives Program Supervisor, and I'm going to start my screen. Move that away. Okay, sorry about that. Getting the PowerPoint set up. So I'm here to talk about Frederick Law Olmsted Sr. and Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. and what the legacy is for the Park District and why the Park District is part of a national, part of the national attention to the Olmsted brothers and their legacy. The National Association of Olmsted Parks is having an event or a campaign this year called Olmsted 200. It has to do with Frederick Law Olmsted Sr.'s birthday when he was born. So I'm going to go through the slides here. A lot of his parks across the country, and so here, this is part of their event website. Through across the country, people are putting their events on this website for promoting the acknowledgement of Olmsted's legacy as a landscape architect here in the United States. In 2014, we actually did, the Park District actually did partner with the National Association of Olmsted Parks. We had this was part of a symposium, and it was also a great opportunity to signify our 80th anniversary. And we had landscape architects from all over the country come and see our parks. And so now I just want to talk a little bit about why Olmsted is important to us and important to California. Olmsted started his career in landscape architecture, and he became famous for his design of Central Park in New York City. And part of that was really establishing a line where developers couldn't go, and a green space for public enjoyment. And that was just to have a healthy public, an open space, a green space, and even back in 1853, it was considered important for the public to have a space. Olmsted in the East Coast was known for landscapes that were very cultured. A lot of this was sidewalks and pools and planted forests. But he was also known for protecting landscapes. So this was later in his career when he was getting involved with protecting areas that were becoming overdeveloped. And at the time, Niagara Falls in New York was getting encroached on both sides, and people were trying to find ways to use energy, and we're industrializing that site. And he fought for that alongside many other people to protect that land. It's now a national park. And then here in California, Olmsted kind of went through a life change. He wanted to become a gold miner, and he came to California. That was his main reason for coming. And that didn't work out for him. And so he decided to go back into landscape architecture, and he was getting ready to leave. Before he left, they said, "Can you come see Yosemite? We have got a problem with developers trying to develop the valley." And he went there and created a plan. And that plan became very significant for the founding of the National Park Service, the amount of information that was in there. This was innovative comments about having beautiful scenery for people to enjoy, that it was for all people to enjoy, and also too was a time to think about wilderness and how that doesn't need to be landscaped, and it can be wild forever. And while he was also here in California, he did come to UC Berkeley. They asked him to make a plan, and that plan also didn't come into fruition. But he was famous for saying to save the hills and the scenic byway during that time. And he was pointing up to Tilden, or what became Tilden Park at that time, or before that time, sorry. And it became a rallying cry for many years, actually, until the East Bay Regional Park District was founded. It was a rallying cry to say that this hero of the national parks and for conservation also wanted a park here. And Olmsted also planned the Mountain View Cemetery in Oakland. So the Olmsted brothers came to California after Olmsted Sr. passed away after 1903. And they came here to develop a lot of parks that were in Southern California. So Palo Verde is a place where it has been beautifully landscaped. There's park and open space, but also development there, and other places in LA. John Charles Olmsted was the stepson, and Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. was the son of Frederick Law Olmsted Sr. And in this picture, this is actually the group that came to California. I also want to point out George Gibbs, who's standing right there in the middle, because I'm going to mention him in a minute. And Stella Obst, I also, because today is the first day of Women's History Month, I do want to point Stella out, and I may be talking about her later in other presentations. And she was Frederick Law Olmsted Jr.'s assistant for 40 years. She was very into landscape architecture, and at a time when women weren't allowed to be landscape architects. So here we go back to Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. During this time, he was asked to look at the state of California and they were looking for developing a plan for the state parks. And Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. went across California looking at different sites, some like Redwood National Park and the state parks that are up Northern California. Mount Diablo was also part of that map. But it was a lot for him, and he was pretty exhausted after doing that tour. But he left behind George Gibbs. And George Gibbs was part of instilling that Olmsted legacy continuing in California when the Olmsted brothers were asked to do the plan for the East Bay Regional Park District. It was actually a proposal, and the proposal was to help us understand that we had these 10,000 acres of watershed land to save. We had concerned citizens from all walks of life who wanted the land saved for parkland. And George Gibbs and Ansel Hall from the National Park Service went to work on a plan. And which came this map, and I'm hoping most of you have seen this map before. It is the 10,000 acres of watershed land, but planned out and mapped out for a park. And this was part of the campaign for the community to vote. And in 1934, they did vote for an East Bay Regional Park District. And after 1934, and that was the Great Depression, and we had the New Deal programs, and this was when there was mass unemployment, people were out of work, and the programs that President Roosevelt put together, the Works Progress Administration, and the Civilian Conservation Corps, the Park District benefited greatly from them. And at the same time, Olmsted Jr. asked a lot of his associates if they could volunteer and go and help the Civilian Conservation Corps and other programs. So George Gibbs decided to stay here in California and keep and maintain the Olmsted legacy and plan for the Park District. And that's him in this picture here with the CCC. This is at Tilden. And a group of, and also National Park Service representatives. The National Park Service did help with our first master plan. And it looks very similar to the Olmsted map in 1930. So I just wanted to kind of like say that we continued that Olmsted legacy even after the plan in 1930 had been created. We still continued this legacy within our master plan, and it continued through the 1940 master plan. And that's the end of my presentation. We're interested in doing an event. I love this picture. This is a Google Earth picture of today. It's not Central Park, but definitely you could see that line of development has stayed now for 86 years, I should know, or 87 years. And this is Tilden and Redwood. So it's all the way up through past the Caldecott Tunnel. So we'd like to try to have an event this year and to have something that we could put on the celebration website, the national one. And it would be basically an evening where we could have a lecture and exhibits. And we were thinking at Tilden, at the nature area and the visitor center, we can actually have it outside on the patio. So that was it. And we're looking at May and June dates. But you know, really right now we've got some flexibility about when we can have this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda.
Fabulous.
That was a very good presentation and very interesting. We'll go around to the board for comments or questions. But I want to suggest that if you plan that event, make sure our former general manager can attend. I think, just last week I was listening in on a presentation he was making for Save Mount Diablo, in which he was espousing on the history of the Olmsteds, senior and junior, and certainly is an expert on that history and its impact on this park district and the Bay Area. So that's just my 2 cents for that planning. Questions, comments from the board? I'll look around. Director Lane.
I can't believe it was 2014 that we had Stanford had the symposium and we had that great tour. That's a long time ago.
You want another one, I can tell.
Well, we have a lot of positive things to say about Olmsted's vision and the brothers' vision for the park. So I'm looking forward to an event here. And are you thinking September, or do you have some kind of month that you're planning?
We looked at the calendar, but we are kind of looking between May and June as some possible dates. But there could be a possibility to move it into the fall as well. We're kind of trying to move it around where it could be with the dedication. It could be on a weeknight and in towards the evening time. And we're just thinking because of parking and public access, it might be better to wait until later in the day.
So the Olmsted 200 is all year.
It's all year.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the presentation.
Director Eccles?
Hi, thank you, Brenda, for the report. It very, very interesting and very informative. And I just really wanted to say that I appreciate the report and the information and look forward to hearing more about the event.
Director Rosario?
Yeah, thank you. Great presentation, Brenda. And I really, I think anytime we get an opportunity to celebrate how this park district started is just, it's something we should always remember, and we should always bring forward to the public, because out of it's just something, a story that comes out of a dream, and a lot of the things that we do start out as ideas and dreams, and I think it's important that we continue that attachment to our history, and it's inspirational. And I think not only just the remembering of what happened, but also for our current employees and our current administration here, to don't be afraid to think boldly and carry on. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Rosario. Director Corbett?
I also am quite impressed by this presentation, but I think one of the most important things, or things that hit me the most, is just taking a look at efforts to protect and save open land, and then see what a difference it makes to the community over so many years. And that helps encourage us to continue doing what was done at that time and the work that we do now to protect open space, and how that will impact our communities just by saving that land and keeping it open and protecting the natural species that live in the area. It's just so impressive to see what a difference that has made, to have that open space over all these years. So let's keep doing it.
Director Wieskamp?
Thank you, as always. Precise and to the point presentations. That's what I always like about what you do. Do you have any idea how many districts or cities in the United States have a park that was designed by Olmsted's?
Olmsted designed over 700 public parks across the country. And he was commissioned he had over 6,000 commissions. This would have been the legacy between the father and the son. So they are across the country. And part of that effort was the parks are getting so old. Some of the other areas of the country, that this was part of bringing that legacy back and making sure that we knew that it was a really important part of American history, and these parks are still can be valuable to the public.
Well, I think we all know the value. No one else may watch a program called Hometown, but it takes place in Laurel, Mississippi. And in watching that, one of the things they referred to, this isn't a big community, but it's an old one, near a university, was that they had an Olmsted Park and they were very proud of it, that design. So obviously you didn't have to be a big undertaking. It went to small ones, and that's showed by the numbers. So what a good idea and a bad time to work on something like this that people can enjoy and be proud of. So thank you very much.
Director Waspy.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Brenda. And I won't follow up on everybody else other than to say that I'm so happy that what was it, your hobby, that when you were doing on this at the archives, it turned into this incredible position that you've created. And I'm so happy for you and happy for the Park District, because your love of history and the culture of the district is showing through. And I think anytime we can honor that history and culture is great. And I commend you for all you're doing. And to add to President Coffey's, I hope, we've kind of been in a hole for a couple of years here, but if we do have things like this, these events, not only past board members, the retirees association is just, they're still dialed into the Park District. They really love it. So I hope we include those folks also. I know we will. So thanks for your work.
Thank you, Dennis. Any other comments? Brenda, would it be much trouble for you to pull up your slides again and go back to the second to last? Because I had a question on that slide and then you went forward. And I want to recapture that if I could. Right before this. There you go.
This one.
Yes.
Yes.
So this was the master plan
In 1936.
in 1936.
It's a little known master plan, but it is definitely where the Park District started with planning the early parks. And I mean, the early park, a lot of that is kind of like in the red areas. But this is just one of the maps. There's several maps in the 1936 master plan. And it's actually one of my favorite plans because it has such inspirational language in there that was written by the National Park Service for the East Bay Regional Parks and what it could provide for the public. This is in our archives.
Thank you. So what went through my mind as you were quickly presenting this map and then moving on was how incredibly close to this concept we actually achieved.
Agreed.
Between the Park District and East Bay Mud and their watershed, it does end up extending all the way out to Briones, as originally envisioned in the master plan, out to El Sobrante, both sides of the dam road, Kennedy Grove, land surrounding Kennedy Grove, and then off in the eastern end of the road. So it's just remarkable that in 1934, we've actually achieved all of this preservation of open space, if not more, from the original map of those areas covered. And that's what caught my eye. And thank you for bringing 1936. So thank you for pulling that up again. And that triggered Director Rosario.
Yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, Olmsted, or one of the Olmsteds did the city plan for the city of Oakland, which unfortunately was not used because it preserved just about every creek in the every natural creek in Oakland. And it was, of course, as you see, it was discarded, but it was too bad. But as you mentioned, it is Women's Recognition Month. And I just wanted to point out that Amelia Reinhardt was the first woman. And then in between, there were no women until 1970s. I think Mary Jeffords was the first woman after. And so I think it would be great for this month if we could highlight those women that became board members for the Park District. I think including our present members, and I think it would be nice to see all those women that contributed to the Park District.
Thank you, Director Rosario. Actually, we just put up on our website the Women in Parks.
Oh, great.
And we did add Director Mary Lee Jeffords, or former Director Mary Lee Jeffords, to that list. So yeah, yes.
Excellent.
You can go there and see some of the names at least, not everybody, but
Yeah.
some of them.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Are there any other comments? Dr. Alvarez?
I just want to finish the story because it's a great story. So the Olmsteads passed on the opportunity to develop Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. And it was William Hammond Hall who was contracted by the city to take on the challenge of designing Golden Gate Park, who then was fired by the Rec and Park Commission because he's the first individual who introduced the practice of thinning the forests to prevent for fuel vegetation management and to allow the trees to thrive. So then he was hired by the state, California Natural Resources Agency, and then he became the California's father for all of our waterworks. And Olmsted came back and saw Golden Gate Park. And so again, the vision of what can be and not to despair too much on the current circumstances. So that's the story in terms of California.
I think we've stretched this item out as long as we are going to be able to. I could spend another hour on this history, but we need to take up our original redistricting issue in about 5 minutes. I would want to note on the next agenda item would be announcements from closed session, which we have none since we did not have a closed session today. And then item 6 would be board committee reports. Director Waspy, do you know off the top if there was anything you needed to augment on the Finance Committee report?
There were no questions. I have nothing to augment.
Think some more. All right, I've gotten a request for maybe a 5-minute break to allow our team to prep for the districting representation, but really a 5-minute break. So let's come back at 1:50, or what is it, 2:50, 1:50, as predicted in our agenda. So just 5 minutes, please, folks. Thank you.
It's actually going to be a 4-minute break because it's 1:46.
Somebody know.
All right, Madam Clerk, could you check and see if we're fired up and ready to go?
We never stopped the streaming
All right.
since it was going to be such a short break. So we're good.
All right, then we have reconvened and we are moving to the second item on the agenda, Executive and Legislative Division. First public hearing, consideration of the East Bay Regional Park District Ward redistricting and review of draft maps. And I'm going to do this again. Reopening the public hearing on this item. And if they are ready, Eric, do you want to introduce the presentation?
Yeah, thank you, President Coffey. Eric Feeler, Chief of Government and Legislative Affairs for the Park District. I wanted to start by acknowledging the support of our legal counsel, Jason Rosenberg and Lisa Baldinger, moving this forward with our consultants, the National Demographics Corporation. We have them here with us today, Kristen Parks and Doug Johnson. They will be sharing two maps with you all. Map A, as President Coffey referred to, is the minimal change map, and map B is the NDC cities map. And then at the end, they will be going through with the online mapping tool to show where all the changes in the streets and park boundaries are for each potential change in the ward. As the board knows, there was a need to have some changes because the deviation was over 10% between the largest, most populated ward and the least populated ward. So there's a current, the two maps have current deviation of 8 or 7%, and those are within the comfort level for our consultants. Lastly, no public maps were received by the consultant prior to February 8th, but we do understand that a member of public shared with a board member a possible map, and we will be working to provide that to NDC. So with that, I'd like to introduce Kristen and Doug for their presentation, and then we can have questions at the end.
Thank you so much, Eric. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm just going to give an overview of the process, what we've been through, and then dig deeper into the draft maps that we are presenting today. And thank you all for your patience as we waited until the posted time for the hearing. So this process began in the fall of 2021, and NDC has been working with staff and the board to present the results of the 2020 census, the data of the current wards, and strategizing how to bring that current ward map into compliance with state and federal law. And of course, we need this map to be approved and in place in time for the November 8th election, as this is an election year. So the role of the board in this process is to ensure compliance with those legal requirements and to hold one public hearing prior to the adoption of the new map that will be in place for the next 10 years until the next census. The goal today is for the board to provide additional direction to staff and consultants, particularly on the draft maps that we will be presenting to you, map A and map B. Ideally, the board will identify a preferred map and may request some additional changes to that map if necessary, and then it can come back and be introduced for adoption. So here is the beautiful East Bay Regional Park District and the current ward boundaries. Of course, it is hard to see detail on any one-page map of the district. So that's why I'll be switching in a moment to the interactive map that is publicly available online and allows us to zoom in and out around the boundaries. I just want to point out that one thing that also changes every 10 years. I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off because it looks like my internet might be a little bit dicey. One thing that changes every 10 years is the census block geography. So I will show you those census blocks and some of the areas in which they have changed as well. So the legal requirements, the first and most important legal requirement comes from federal law, and that is that each ward should have equal population. And what we mean by equal population is not all the way down to the individual person, exactly the same population, but that the total population deviation between the smallest ward and the largest ward should be under 10%. We'll comply with the Federal Voting Rights Act, and we will make sure to avoid racial gerrymandering. State law says that the board may also consider topography, geography, cohesiveness, contiguity, integrity, and compactness of territory, and communities of interest. So one of the communities of interest we've talked about throughout this process are the cities and places. However, we also have talked about minimizing the change to election cycles and preserving the core of the existing ward boundaries. So as Eric mentioned in his introduction, when you look at the current boundaries and you look at the population numbers according to the 2020 census, that total deviation is above the permissible 10%. So the total deviation as of 2020 for the current wards is 14.76%, and we need to get that under 10%, ideally under 9%. And you can see that this is driven by primarily by, wards 5 and 7 being having more population than the ideal population size for a ward. And then we have a few other wards that have significantly less population. So here's the math, just for those who want to have a reference to go back to. As we drew these two draft maps, we aimed to get each ward as close as possible to 407,361. We're not going to ever get that perfect, but we are able to get that population balanced, which means getting the total deviation under 10%. So the first map, the minimal change map, the NDCA map, has a total deviation of 8.08%. And the goal of this map was to balance the population while making minimal adjustments to the current ward boundaries. So that will be the first map I show you. And the NDCB map has a total deviation of 7.46%. And that's because it reflects some additional changes to the boundaries. The goal of this map was to balance population while also minimizing the division of cities and places to the extent possible, while preserving the core of the existing wards. So map A, the minimal change map here, I'm going to zoom in on these areas of change in the interactive map, but I just wanted to provide a high-level overview of how, if we are trying to move population, it has a ripple effect, and it's really going to ultimately affect every ward to some extent. So you can see some of the areas where there's change here, and other areas that may look like there are changes. Those changes are just census block geography that has minimally shifted since the previous decade. So these are the areas that we are actually moving population in order to bring this map into compliance. So first, starting right at the top left, around Pinole, you see that we have unified Pinole into District 1. So that is a change. So the black dotted line are the current ward boundaries, and then the shaded areas are the proposed ward boundaries. So bringing that city completely into Ward 1. And then around wards 2 and 6, there's an attempt there to to stretch Ward 2 over to the freeway and unify some of the communities there. Then around Ward 4 and 3's boundaries, what you see there is just bringing in some additional population from Ward 3 into Ward 4. And you see a change also in the boundary between Wards 3 and Wards 5. And that is, again, pulling some of Ward 5's population into Ward 3. And then finally, on the right side of the screen, there's another change here with Byron and Discovery Bay, and then some of the areas around those communities, bringing them from Ward 7 into Ward 6. And again, we can zoom in on all of these changes, but I want to just give you the high level overview. This is for map A. In map B, we're making 3 of the same changes that we made in map A. Those are the green areas. But there are some additional changes in order to unify cities and towns. And so those are the orange areas here. So you can see there's some more changes following city boundaries. One of the big changes here at the bottom of the screen is bringing all of the city of Newark into Ward 3, but still dividing the city of Fremont between Wards 3 and 5. So a lot of this is the balancing act. It's not possible to draw the boundaries completely following the city and town boundary lines. But from the map A to map B, we actually reduce the number of cities and towns that are divided almost in half. So there's a significant reduction of the splitting of cities and towns in this map. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the interactive review map so we can look at this a little bit closer. And I will walk you through first the minimal change map, and then we can take any questions on the proposed changes. I'm going to leave on the screen the current ward boundaries outlined so that you can see those areas. And then when we zoom in a little bit more, I know we might want to look at the parkland, so we can put that on there. But for right now, I'm going to leave it off just to start, but it is there if you want to look at that. And then you can also put up the census places. What that is are actually the city and town boundary lines. There we go. Map A is what we're going to start with. And we'll start with the changes between District 1 and District 7. So you can see here, this is not a huge amount of population, but we are moving Pinole into District 1 here. And if I turn on the boundaries here, you can see that better, that we're actually now just following the boundary line of Pinole. And where you see the red line and the black line. Oh, is there a question?
We're not seeing any movement, Kristen.
Are you seeing a map?
Yes.
Oh, you're not seeing the map. Okay, hold on one second. You're not seeing the map at all. You are seeing still the PowerPoint. There you go. Now you're seeing the map. I'm so sorry. So this is the interactive map. And this is where you can zoom in and out for the current wards and maps A and B, as well as the overlays available. So this is map A, the minimal change map. And what I'm doing right now is showing you the black line is the current ward boundary, and the shaded areas are the proposed ward boundaries. The red lines on this map are the city and town boundaries. So for this first change, which appears both in map A and in map B, we are bringing Pinole into District 1. So you can see that now the District 1 boundary is following the city limit there. So that's that first change in the minimal change map. If we zoom in here between wards 2 and 6, let's zoom right in here and show you that we are pulling into Ward 2 all of Castle Hill, and then really just pulling Ward 2 to the 680 here. Okay, so that is an intentional change that's moving some population.
And how much population is that?
That's a great question. I don't think I have the census blocks on here, but I do have the ward place population. So you can see here that it's bringing in probably 3,000, 4,000 people. I mean, this is a significant amount of population here. And again, we're doing this to balance it out, to get the total deviation down. So perhaps instead of the places, I'll keep up the population of the cities and towns. So that's a little more helpful, so you can see the number of
Another question.
folks. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Kristen, could you go to the boundary of 4 and 3?
Of
Around
course.
Castro Valley and Lake Chabot? Because I know Director Corbett has a question or two. Ellen, if you're
Sure. And we can go, I'm sorry, my mouse is being funky. We can go just according to your questions. If that's we can go ahead and do that, and you guys can instruct me on that. Okay, so we're going to boundary between 4 and, say again?
4 and 3 around Castro Valley. If Ellen Corbett is available, I'd like her to come on and express her thoughts on that area. I'm not seeing her come on though.
That seems to be the area.
There you
of
are. Okay.
most change. One thing that was important to me was to be able to see city streets and such, just to sort of understand how the district could change. And also the boundaries around park land, showing how that's impacted by these changes. And I know that people have said that that information is available on the maps, but the actual boundary lines of the parks aren't necessarily easy to read on some of these maps.
Kristen, did you hear Director Corbett? She might have dropped off. Kristen?
I'm here.
Okay.
And so yes, the park boundaries were added to the PDFs. And then they are also available here. I just turned them on and they are labeled. So that is available. I know it's not necessarily easy to navigate these online tools, but those park boundaries are there. And I can also provide you with a report with any changes to wards and parks. But keeping in mind that even the current ward map does, divide a number of parkland.
Well, obviously parkland typically doesn't have population, so it doesn't, address
Exactly.
the issue
You're
of
exactly right.
those numbers.
So
But
we are
again,
not
even
intentionally moving any parkland, right? Because we are focused on.
But it would be nice to know a little bit more on these maps to show the difference that's made based on this. And I may have to study this a little further and then talk to you about it even after today, because it's sort of hard to understand some of these lines on these maps.
Sure. Are there any questions I can answer for you right now?
Kristen, let me add one thing there too. This is Doug Johnson from NDC working with Kristen. Keep in mind too, and Kristen, maybe show them on the base map gallery, you can switch to even a satellite image here. So whatever detail you want to see, you can zoom all the way in and you can see individual houses in addition to the parks and streets and all that. So all the detail you want to see on the changes is right here in this hopefully fairly easy to use system.
Were those systems available to look at prior to today?
Yes.
Well, I can tell you in trying to figure this out, it was hard to see where the lines were in going to the system that you had.
Yeah,
So-
well, if you want to look right now, are you able to see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so one of the things you'll see here is the red lines being the boundaries of Cherryland. So those are being brought into, Cherryland's being completely brought into Ward 4. So that is one of the things you see there. And then, you know, some of this right here that's beyond the boundary of Cherryland is really just trying to follow more major roads.
Mm-hmm.
So that sort of explains why there's a little bit of a jagged line here. What I am following is unifying Cherryland here.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I turn off this satellite view and just go back to streets, then you can see I'm following Western Boulevard and A Street.
And Kristen, can you turn the parks on and off there so they can see the difference?
Absolutely. There's no parks right in this area, but the parks are on. I can zoom out again. You can see then there's also a little bit more of Hayward that is brought in for population balance going, you know, keeping the current ward boundary at Hesperian, but then bringing it from the 880 over to Martin Luther King.
Mm-hmm.
And then
will there be an opportunity after today's meeting to have additional questions answered? Because, you know, I'm looking at what you're providing now, but I may have additional questions.
Absolutely.
And the key thing when you look at this map is to look for where the colors don't follow the black line. So the black line is your current ward. So where the color goes across the black line is where there's a change proposed.
Right.
And when you're looking at Lake Chabot, let me zoom in right there. What you're seeing are not actual changes. This is simply the census just improving their block line, right? And actually, you know, from the black line 10 years ago, the census has improved it to keep it on, to move it to the road. So this is not actually changing any population or in reality, the boundary line of your ward here. Even though it looks like there's a difference between the black line and the purple shaded area here in the park, we're not trying to take in, you know, whatever, you know, acres of park here. We are just matching to the updated census line.
Right, understand.
Yeah, so.
And the line around the actual lake itself, the water line, show me that with your arrow.
I can just zoom in a little bit and then you should see that. And I maybe if I turn off or reduce the opacity here a little bit. Can you see the water line now better?
Yes.
Okay, there you go.
And the red?
So the red is that's the Castro Valley city limit, is that red line.
And the black line is the map.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the black line is the current ward boundary.
Okay.
I guess the
So
only,
would-
the only question here would be, do Ellen and I have to go to some type of war over the island? The island is incredibly important.
Exactly.
We could take up arms, I guess, but I'm happy to see that it's like Lake Chabot split between us.
Well, yes, but the trails, it looks like, are not.
It's keeping the current line in
The
the
black
park there.
line is the. ward
Yeah,
I think the black
Yeah,
one
so
goes
what,
through the
we're not
lake.
making changes here, right? It goes through the lake up here.
Yeah, it goes through the top end of the lake.
right. So what you're saying is no additional parts of the park are being moved into another district.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's important to clarify because the lines don't, they don't align perfectly. But yeah, we're not changing. We're not putting you at battle over the lake.
I don't know. I'm not going to say anything. But it might be a nice opportunity to look at having parts of the park shared. There is a small part of the park, I believe, in the Purple District. But,
Yes.
Correct.
So, but moving the line slightly into the park where there's no population shouldn't impact the issues with regard to that concern, right? The population issue.
That is correct. And you can draw
Keep
those
in-
lines.
Yeah, keep in mind, however, that where there's no population, the Census Bureau tends to draw very large census blocks. So we can't just draw a line anywhere. We have to follow the census blocks.
Right. So where are the census blocks? Are you going to share that information with us too?
I thought I had it on here. I don't. I can share it with you if necessary. But
Yes,
again, if you just want us,
I would like, you don't have to do that right now, but I would like to see that before any further meetings on this go by. Because is that line
Absolutely.
where it is specifically because of those current rules?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, that would be something worth having further discussion, but I know there's other members of the board that would like to talk about their districts as well. So I think I will talk to you
Director Corbett,
later.
If you want to instruct us to bring in, another census block if possible of the park, and have a more even split to the extent possible, that's something that should not, that's something we can do. And it's not something that's going to change the population deviation. So it's not something that should preclude you today from identifying a preferred map if at all possible.
Yes, you'll just have to share the information with me to make sure that, we're following whatever rules and we're being fair with the division of this land between districts, which is important to me as well. I don't want to cause any disputes.
Understood.
Director Rosario?
Yes, just to address Director Corbett's want for or need for more open space, I would be amenable to looking at sharing or even giving her Leona Canyon, if that's a possibility. Both of our wards are very close in population. What would that look like if we shared Leona Canyon?
That's this area right here.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't actually looked at that yet.
These are very minimal changes.
I was looking more at Lake Chabot. I hadn't looked at Leona yet. But if you, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be selfish. If you look at the various districts, you'll notice that some districts have much less open space and parkland than others. And that's nobody's fault, but it's just a reality. So it would be nice to take a look at some of those issues.
Let me ask a question. This is Colin Coffey. Kristen, just to confirm, I think what you're saying, the smallest building blocks you have available are the census blocks.
Correct.
So you can't divide census blocks in order to say, take one feature, geographic feature like a lake. Let's say you wanted to move a lake into another ward. You couldn't just do that based on the geography of the lake. You'd have to look at what census tracts encompass that lake, to use that example.
Correct. And keep in mind that, you know, these are election districts. So the focus is providing a map to the registrar of voters of both counties, right? So that they know where the voters are.
That we're all acutely aware of. We're dealing with the mathematics of population and drawing legally valid boundaries. So we know that's the baseline that we have to work with. And then in terms of adjusting boundaries, what I was getting at is we can't just tweak along streets or geographic features. We have to make sure there are census tracts that equate to the areas we're tweaking along the boundary.
Yes,
Well,
you're correct.
And
Okay.
having that information would be helpful. And we also know, again, with a park district, there are obviously parks that don't have population in them, except when people are there hiking and etc. But they don't actually live there as part of the population. So that's something I'll have to just take a look at and maybe have some more questions for you at another time. But I'm going to pass this on to others who may have questions.
All right, so I want to bring us back. We wanted to get to Director Corbett's questions, but Kristen, I want to take us back to Ward 6. And Director Lane had some follow-up questions as you were exploring the boundary around Ward 6, and I believe Ward 2.
Before you bounce back, I mean, Leona Park is a self-contained park, but if you moved that ward line up, doesn't that include a population on both sides?
We're really close.
So,
Yeah.
yes, while Kristen's showing this to you on that map, I'm looking at it in the mapping software, and yes, they're at a minimum, you're gonna move about, I don't know, 1,000 people to move Leona Park.
Yeah.
Or Leona Canyon. There's people all around that.
Wouldn't be a significant change population wise.
Well, I think that's very interesting. You know, that would add another park to Ward 4, right?
An open space park.
Yeah, and an open space park with minimal change.
So again, they'll have to. You folks can look at the census tract breakdown for those, or help us do our own mapping on the tool when we get the links to it, correct?
Yes, absolutely. But I think the easier thing is for you to instruct us to try to make this change in a way that doesn't throw off the balance, and then we can bring that back to you.
Okay.
All right, and Director Corbett's going to follow up with you offline on those possible
Yes.
changes. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did you want to add something on to that, or should we go back to 6?
Let's go back to 6.
Okay, so I can, I'm very familiar with this area, and I think most of it's Alamo. So where is the city boundary here? Is this Walnut Creek that you're making the change to, or is that unincorporated Alamo?
So we're talking about this area right here, correct? That is Walnut Creek. A little bit of Walnut Creek.
A little bit.
I believe, yeah, I believe it is. But again,
Yeah.
it's really trying to follow the freeway.
right? This is, you know, part of Walnut Creek's already in the blue district, and then where she zoomed in, there's the neck of Walnut Creek that crosses the freeway and puts the far southwestern piece of the city with it. So it's just adding the neck and Castle that's between Castle Hill and Saranac into the district.
Yes, I'm just saying it's not as clear a line as currently is there because it's Rossmore for Ward 2. So you're extending into an area that is some Walnut Creek and some Alamo. So it's not exactly a pure city line, but that's not what you're doing with minimal change, right? For me, it's, I'm almost, if we do the eastern boundary changes, my ward is already the largest. So I can see why you would want to trim some at the east. I would just like to know exactly where the city boundary is there. However,
it's the line in red there. So where you see Castle Hill, where you see Saranac, the neck between those two is the part of the city. No, up farther in the blue, Kristen.
okay, so the blue is not only Ward D, it is also Walnut Creek in that location. Where you say Castle something?
Castle Hill.
If you can see the screen, yeah, there's Castle Hill is unincorporated. That's moving. And then
okay, so unincorporated does not mean it's Walnut Creek, right? Incorporated is Walnut Creek. Unincorporated is not Walnut Creek.
right.
What are you saying, Doug?
So you were asking where the city line is there, or what part of the city is moving? Is that what your question was?
I want to know where the Walnut Creek incorporated boundary is.
Okay. Yeah, Kristen, can you click on Walnut Creek and it'll turn blue in the city? Kristen? Kristen, you there?
I'm sorry, I'm having some connectivity issues. Do you need me to zoom in here?
No, can you just click in Walnut Creek so we get the blue outline around it?
No, I can't.
Kristen,
Yes, just okay, I hear you now.
can you click on Walnut Creek so we get the blue outline around it? Just in the city. Just click.
Yeah.
There you go.
No, this is the outline of Walnut Creek.
Yeah,
So this
that's
is
what I
Walnut
wanted.
Creek. This is Walnut Creek.
That's what you wanted to see. So everything that's in that blue outline is the city of Walnut Creek.
So I have quite a bit
Okay,
of
that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Walnut Creeks.
Okay.
So then you wanted to look at 6 at the eastern area?
Correct.
Okay.
So if you want to compare this area with the map B, incorporates all of Walnut Creek into Ward 6.
Oh, I wasn't looking at B. I was looking at A, at the eastern part of Ward 6.
Yeah, Kristen, let's
Oh,
stay on
yes.
A. Let's stay on A and we'll have individual questions about B later.
Absolutely. Okay, other questions on map A or areas you want to look more closely at?
Move to the eastern end of 7 and 6. There you go. And we want to know if Director Lane has any questions concerning the new boundaries surrounding Discovery Bay and Byron.
Well, I just think that's lovely. Well, that was good.
That's what we like to hear.
Yeah, and in my interpretation of lovely is that we are shifting populations in a manner that actually reflects cohesive boundary lines. We're not drawing strange lines here. We're just extending the boundary of 6 down Marsh Creek Road over to Highway 4 and Discovery Bay, and you get a real cohesive exchange of land here between 7 and 6. So I agree, that is lovely. Anything else? Director Lane?
Well, I guess these straight lines do show census tracts, or are they property parcels?
They're following the census blocks.
Which also follow property parcel lines as well. And in this area, I think much of this is streets too.
Okay. All right.
All right, let's continue our tour of the 2 East Bay counties, and we'll. I want to ask Director Wieskamp if she has some boundaries around 5 that you'd like to take a closer look at on map A.
Bottom line is I certainly do not want to cross the county line. That makes no sense. The Tri-Cities staying together. I'd like to know the western boundary. Is that the western boundary? I've got it on. Closer. Okay. The western boundary, is that the western boundary of the city of Dublin, or just a little further out from the boundary?
That is the boundary of Dublin.
Good. Okay, that's fine. That's consistent. As far as I'm concerned, I knew because the
But
population
that's
growth,
the,
we were going to need some change. But I think I could think anybody could live with either one, but I think the minimal change makes sense to me. Dennis would be the other person involved because we're the one that share a border, whatever a border means between districts. And so I'm satisfied with either one. Minimal is fine, but everybody that I know loves parks. It doesn't matter whether it's in my ward or another one. But whatever Dennis thinks too.
just to point out here, the change is actually bringing into Ward 3 part of Dublin and part of Pleasanton over up to 680.
There can't be very much population there. Change. That would be in the sort of Philly section. But either one works for me.
Okay, Ann, should we move over to
Is that really 680? awfully wobbly 680. It looks like it goes through Pleasanton.
680 is right down the center.
It's gotta be
That's-
Pleasanton
That's
Ridge.
Foothill Road, isn't it? Or,
The black line is, looks like it could be.
or maybe Palmaris. Oh, no. Maybe I get a winery.
It would be nice to see Palmeras, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
If it's minimal change, I don't know why they would have changed that. Obviously, I can't
Yeah,
tell.
it's just,
Map.
it's about,
It should include all the city of Pleasanton.
Current.
Hmm.
I don't see that that's dotted line.
Can you look at a smaller map and tell whether it's all of the city of Pleasanton, including the western side? No reason not to.
Yes, you can see the red line there, the thicker red line is the edge of the orange district, and that's the city of
Yeah.
Pleasant. So the whole city is in this.
Fine. Because I knew there was change because there's so much growth in Fremont. So much growth in the Tri-Valley that I knew it was coming all down to 5, but I don't see a big deal. I think it works.
I don't understand the line.
As long as all of Pleasanton's in there.
Director Lane is questioning which line, right?
You're looking at wiggly lines in a very small version. But I thought Pleasanton Ridge was all in it.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at this.
Yeah, I can't tell. Minimal sounds good to me, but I still say that the average citizen out there loves all our parks and they don't worry about what ward. they're
Okay,
in.
and then, so we will all have the opportunity to go into the street level version of the tool. So we can do that after the meeting if they're not able to pull it up quickly and readily during the meeting. With that understanding, I think we should keep on the grand tour.
And I have questions on the map too before we move
Yeah,
on.
we're going to get to Ward 1 and 3 and 2.
So do you think this line is the line?
All I want to know is if the entire city of Pleasanton is in it. I can't tell from this map.
Well, you know, what Doug said was it goes down
He said yes.
I-680.
Then if it's all in the city, I don't say I have a problem. with
Well, isn't there plenty of Pleasanton on the west side of 680?
Sure.
that. Yeah,
So then it's not all. That's what I'm saying.
It is here. Let me share my screen because I know Kristen's having connection issues over there. So,
Yes, that's a good idea.
we're going to come back at it. If there's any discussion that needs to be, they can
No,
study.
I mean, this is, if you see what other agencies are doing, their boards are getting into these, street level discussions. So it's not unusual what we're doing right here, and it is time consuming and we should be patient with it. But I just think in the background, we should know that we'll be able to get the street versions ourselves. So the issue before you, Doug, is whether the entire city of Pleasanton is in Ward 5.
yes, it's the entire city is in Ward 5 now, and it stays there. You can see the blue outline on your screen is the city border of Pleasanton, which is outlined in the red line, and it's all in.
Is Pleasanton Ridge, the park itself, split or not?
oh, Doug, will you show map A and turn off the
Oh, there you
current
go.
word shading?
Oh,
You can leave the current word outline. Yeah.
oh, I see. Oh,
Yeah, so it does
thank
pull
you,
in.
Kristen. So yeah, so part of Pleasanton does, I'm sorry, thank you, Kristen. Yes, so in map A, correct, part of Pleasanton does go out into Ward 3.
Right.
Not much.
That little piece there. Yeah.
And Pleasanton Ridge currently, you can see is split by the black line. There are 2 little pieces of it. And so this change would unite all of Pleasanton Ridge in, well, all that northern section of Pleasanton Ridge in
Would
3.
be in Ward 4.
3.
Excuse me, 3. And all of the
I don't know. That's
eastern
in-
side would be in Ward 5.
East of the freeway, yes. And then there's a part in the south where, farther south, where Pleasanton crosses again. And that would stay in 5.
East of the freeway.
It's not the,
I would like Pleasant, again, there's so much association with the community. The interconnection with the Historic Museum and all the rest of it on the eastern side. But we've had a split on the ridge. Exactly, I don't know where. Dennis, do you remember? Sort of,
No, I do not remember.
I think it's kind of like the east-west side.
Yeah, but I tend to agree
So
with
I
you.
think if we could work that detail out, there's no population in one part of it. It's just splitting down the ridge.
Well, there's a lot of population between Foothill and the freeway, though. It's moving.
The foothills should be in part of Pleasanton. All of that should be part of Ward 5. It's all constituents.
okay, so what,
We're trying to keep the
Yeah.
city together.
so what you're asking, Anne, is that 5 include all of the incorporated boundary of Pleasanton.
Yeah. And basically the park that would be, has been considered, it all goes back to the wars with, when Hayward was extending. And so it's sort of like the top of the ridge going west was on the other side, part that Hayward came up with.
So we're happy to make the change. The question is then, given that
Well,
5 is over.
map D does that. Map B does that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess, pardon me, Mr. President, may I
Yes,
ask a
please.
question? I guess the question would be, I'm all in favor of this, and and I agree with that, your theory there, but how much population do I lose? Because in Ward 3, I'm one of the lower populations and I guess the question would be, and there is some debate, how many people live on the other side of 680 in Pleasanton? And that would be my only concern. Because if we do that, then there's the domino theory, which would, if I lost 5,000 population, I'd be probably the lowest ward and probably out of compliance, because I think I'm at 8.8 derivation now, if I'm not mistaken. And if that knocks me out, what do I have? Do we have a domino effect of me going south, north, east, or obviously, or
Yes.
not east for sure?
Yes. So
That's why Newark gets added.
right. So you either get
That's
Western
B.
Pleasanton or Newark. Yeah. B.
That's in B.
If you can keep the
Yeah,
population.
I was referring to specifically map A at this point.
Well, it tells you how much population it is that in that area. Division 3, in order to balance, needs to pick up either Pleasanton and Dublin west of 680, which is the way it does it in A, or leave Western Dublin and Pleasanton entirely in 5, and instead come all the way down and get Newark, the whole city. So that's a challenge. When we put Pleasanton back into 5 and A, we need to take something else out. We're happy to make adjustments. We just need to know, we just can't do one without doing the other or some other alternative.
Look at it and see if it's a big deal, just to keep the population together.
Okay, our folks, if Kristen and Doug, you could focus on that region of Pleasanton that would be shifting back and forth between map A and B, and come to a suggestion that would be consistent with keeping Pleasanton all in Ward 5, and if not, exactly what neighborhoods have to go into Ward 4, I'm sorry, Ward 3.
Because obviously Ward 3 is.
All righty, so that's gonna take some digging down at the street level.
Well, I think if we're understanding the director correctly, she wants to put all of Pleasanton, and I don't know if Dublin's included as well, but all of Dublin back together in 5. Is that correct?
I would think that's best if you can. I don't see why not.
Okay, so then the direction would need to be, do we want to take, more Fremont into 3 to balance it, or all the city of Newark into 3 to balance it?
Either one. What do you prefer?
Pardon me, did I hear you say all of the city of Fremont?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, no, part of Fremont or all of the city of Newark. I may have misspoken.
Okay.
Why don't you look at both?
What do you two think of that trade-off? If you keep Dublin and Pleasanton entirely within Ward 5, are you comfortable with shifting Newark into 3?
Well, I mean, I guess the question would be, once again, how many people live on the east side or pardon me, the west side of Highway 680 that would be included in making them all one? And how many people, because we would want to keep Newark contiguous also, and that's no small town.
Okay, so you folks, Doug and Kristen, are going to have to do the math on that trade-off and let us know what it looks like.
Yeah.
Can we do that?
Sure.
All right.
So
Director Lane had
yeah,
a suggestion.
So I have a weird suggestion. So.
Oh, it couldn't be.
And this is kind of a part comment because our friend Ann has all the visitor centers in the world in her ward.
Now, there's
And-
jealousy coming in here.
Well, you know.
One of them is
This
open air.
This is nothing on my ward, but what would be the population? Well, Fremont's a huge city. And so to have part of it not be included in one ward would not be unusual. So if you came down and, you know, if all of Dublin and Pleasanton went to 5 and you came down and took Newark, what about Newark and all the rest of Fremont to the bay? That would mean that Ward 3 would have some visitor centers and the population might work out.
I don't quite get that.
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason why.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah, just.
The County Hills and Ardenwood would come to Ward 3.
Yeah. Take everything west of 5.
Plus, I mean, I hate to use the word G, but look at this. This looks gerrymandered to me.
No, I don't think the word is gerrymandering. I think the word is accommodating populations in a manner that doesn't keep the boundaries cohesive. So you're doing a twist and turn around between Coyote Hills and Fremont, right?
Yeah.
And that looks odd.
And let me just add, you know, and if we show, Doug, if you click Ward Place population, you can see that Newark is 47,000 some folks, right? And then that area of Dublin and Pleasanton that we're talking about is 20,000 something. And I know we can't show that on this map, but I was looking at it, but that whole area, I think it's maybe even 27,000. So they're not an equal trade-off, but they are some of the trade-offs here, right? Other trade-offs can be made around Fremont.
Yeah, I agree with Director Lane. Just throwing Newark into that ward looks strange. It's just a finger going down into the ward. Whereas I was really comfortable, but I don't represent the areas with putting those small sections of Pleasanton and Dublin into Ward 3, if that made the math work. And what we're seeing is if you don't do that with those west of 680 sections of Dublin and Pleasanton, then we're doing things like adding Newark as a trade-off. So I think that's what everyone just give some thought to that, and we can look at it more carefully before our next meeting, individually per our what's happening with each of our wards.
And I think you laid out the question pretty clearly of there's a wraparound to keep Coyote Hills in 5, but at your direction, we could certainly put Coyote Hills into 3, if that's what the directors prefer.
And
I will only say that as much as you can keep the Tri-Valley together, I appreciate it. I think they've been unusual in that they've been cities and they go up to San Ramon and Danville and they speak together on many issues. And I think that's helpful to the district. So I think as much as we can, if it's not going to wreck the whole system, I'd like to try to keep the population together. We've obviously, Fremont's been divided forever in the population. And I haven't heard from anyone in Fremont saying, shift it one way or the other. They have the biggest population next to Oakland, and all their parks are popular. I might lose a park, and Dennis might gain one, which I'm sure would make him happy since they're all nice parks, right?
Very true.
And so perhaps leave Newark, look at Newark if you like, but also just look at a little bit more of Fremont and see if that works.
Okay,
Will do.
Does that work for you, Dennis?
just keep the trade-offs in mind.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, it's all parkland.
I'm malleable, or convincible. Yeah, anything that works is fine.
Yeah.
And I think that's doable, that instead of, in order to keep Dublin and Pleasanton in 5 and not putting Newark in 3, we'll just look more at Fremont. I think that's very reasonable.
Yes.
So in other words, you're suggesting, Kristen, that well, essentially that the map B for Ward 3 would be in fact the solution to that problem. The Ward 3 director would get Newark, but that's too much population, so you would carve out the portion of Fremont that you're pointing at right there. Yeah. Which, and once again, I'm not keeping score, but I just want to clarify it. So I would lose Vargas Plateau and gain Coyote Hills and Ardenwood. That's a question, by the way.
That seems possible. Again, I have to look at the actual numbers, but that seems possible.
Map B.
No, I'm not
continues
asking if
to-
it's possible. I'm not suggesting I want it to happen. I just want to know if unless we really start gerrymandering and cutting around, isn't that, or no, maybe, is Coyote Hills and
Map.
Fremont or Arden, something separate, yeah.
Map B has Coyote Hills and Ardenwood still in 5, and it looks very odd. Again, I don't use the word gerrymandering, which is changing boundaries for political partisan purposes. This is again, making it odd connection to leave Coyote Hills and Ardenwood in 5 when you're moving Newark into 3. It just looks odd geographically on the map. That's what we're saying. So it's a trade-off we all have to think about.
Look at 2 or 3 possibilities. How's that?
Sure.
That's what they're going to do.
Population.
Yes.
All right, counts, isn't it?
All right. Can we move over to board member questions on the other wards? Let's move to, I'm going to get to D right next to me in a moment. Let's first go to 1 and Director Eccles.
Yes,
Board-
hi. Thank you.
Thank you for your patience, Director Eccles.
You're welcome. It's an important discussion. So I just wanted to understand better the southern border. I understand obviously in both maps that Ward 1 would incorporate all of Pinole, which I think makes sense. But I wasn't sure. Okay, wait, now I think. Yeah, I wasn't sure we had changed along the southern border and also with respect to the Claremont Conservancy.
Yeah, there's no change along the southern border. Where there seems to be a difference between the black and red lines is simply the Census Bureau getting a more accurate boundary for Emeryville. So.
And what about the park? Because it doesn't really look like. Okay, so I guess according to your map, it's kind of hard to see. But so the park district border doesn't change either then?
That's correct.
Claremont Canyon.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah, that's just the census getting more precisely following the city border.
Okay. Okay, wait, can you just hold it there for just a second?
Sure.
Just expand, because, whoa, okay. Yeah, I just wanted to see.
Yeah, what you're looking at is the black line is GIS software 10 years ago, not being as fine tuned to the like satellite accurate that GIS is today. So 10 years ago, they kind of simplified the city border, and now we're have the accurate city border.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. But some of these places. Okay, I'll have to take a closer look. Like Panoramic and some of these places I thought were Berkeley, but I guess if you tell me that's where the border is, then I have to believe you.
Yeah. Well, that's where the Census Bureau and they get their data from the cities. So.
Okay. All right. Very good. Is some of this, so is some of it UC Berkeley property? Maybe that's what the difference is, because some of this I don't think is Oakland, but perhaps maybe there's some UC Berkeley territory thrown in here.
Well, it's let me see if I can get Oakland in here. Yeah, so it's according to the Census Bureau, at least it's City of Oakland, but of course, you know, the UC is kind of its own entity. So according to the Census Bureau, that is part of Oakland.
Okay, well, great. Yeah, no, my main question really was to just understand if there were changes, but it sounds like from what you're saying, really the only change is more finely tuning the actual true borders and also adding the rest of Pinole. Okay. That's it.
Correct.
Before leaving one, could you zoom in on the border between Ward 1 and 7 in the Kennedy Grove area? Yeah, right there.
Yeah, so there's a small change here where it's picking up a little territory. I think then it's now following that. Yeah, so I don't know if the city has annexed that territory recently, so we're moving to match the city line, or if it was just a piece of the city was left out, but of the old line. But yes, there is picking up that little stretch of Richmond.
Okay, so that red there that's Ward 1 that we're looking at?
They would be coming into Ward 1, yes.
Okay.
Okay, I think that is Carriage Hills South. And that was an anomaly because there was a portion of Carriage Hills South, that neighborhood in Ward 7. And now, based on the color shading, that's being brought back into 1, which makes sense. Well, I'm not sure. Actually, because could you back out a little more? Zoom out there now. Country View Drive. No, I think I'm wrong. I think that Carriage Hills South is those streets you see there where it says Country View Drive and Cerro Street. I think that's, oh, and that's going into Ward 1. Okay, no. Okay, so it's the unpopulated area between those lines that aren't shaded. That's staying in 7. That's what I'm missing here. No?
Correct. Yeah, so Country View is in Ward 1 currently, and
all right,
that area and stays there. There's this from this sign, there's no buildings at all, much less any homes in this area, but it's a piece of Richmond that was left out. And so it's just following the city border.
Well, okay, well, wait, this brings up another question then, because it looks like then from, if the red line is the shaded area is the new district, but it looks like you've pulled away from, so are you taking Kennedy Grove away from Ward 1 in this map? Because the black line,
No, they aren't, Elizabeth. The black line's going around Kennedy Grove.
no, the black line is the old district, I thought, and then the shaded
Yes.
is the new proposed.
Yes.
So it's splitting it.
And what is the purpose in that?
Most likely it's following the census block because it's following that road right there.
So this census block is not part of unincorporated Richmond then, or
It is unincorporated, correct? I believe.
right, but you know, it would depend on
Oh,
if you're
Well,
following
it's-
the population. I guess I'm not understanding the rationale for that border change, especially if we're looking at minimal change.
That's why I asked. I wasn't able to really follow what was happening with this area, and I think I'm getting, let's leave you with this thought that Kennedy Grove as a park, that area where your cursor is right now, that should remain in Ward 1. So we would need to figure out how the census parcels could be configured to keep Kennedy Grove in Ward 1.
That's where it is now. right?
That, which is where it's been, and it is now.
yeah, we can double check and see if this is a block that we can move, we can put it back in. It, as Christian was saying, if this block is now part of the larger block going out and getting the lake and all that, we may have to, it may be that we can't keep the whole park in. So some of it is definitely staying in one, and we'll look into if we can get the rest of it in there.
Yeah, that area where it says Bay Area Ridge Trail, that is current land bank land across from Sobrante Ridge that is in Ward 7.
Correct.
So that's okay. And obviously where Carriage Hills South came in, that became incorporated and it's being put back in right there. Parts of that were in Ward 7 under the old map. So having that in Ward 1 makes sense in terms of a cohesive neighborhood there. But the portion that is at least the staging area and picnic area for Kennedy Grove has been in Ward 1 and should remain there.
Yeah, that's an easy change. The population of that block is actually quite large. It actually includes Kennedy, the rest of Kennedy Grove, the Ridge Trail, and then also sort of where you see that dotted line is part of it too, but it's only population of 2. So that can easily be added back.
Yeah, there are a couple of houses on Castor Ranch Road. I always wondered about
Yep.
who was there in Ward 7. All right, so that's what to figure out for us.
Oh, before we go on for that though, but to Kristen's point, they've made this a really big census block. So if we put Kennedy Grove together, Bay Area Ridge Trail is also going to move.
That's okay, because that's part of the same park.
Perfect. Okay.
It's just you removing the main part of the park out of 1 and into 7, and that didn't make sense to us.
Yeah, and this is exactly the kind of direction that I like to hear because it doesn't throw off population, but it helps you align the parks the way that you wish.
But I'll put operations on notice that I still want to get a ability to go look at that land bank land up into where it says Bay Area Ridge Trail. I've been wanting that. I'm looking at Jim O'Connor. I've been wanting to go up in that land. If it goes back into Ward 1, that's fine. I still get to go hiking up there
I'm sure that's fine.
without getting arrested. I'll look at Chief. Chief said okay. But it's really nice territory up there. And it's right up against Carriage Hills, and it's being accessed anyway, but it has no trespassing signs all around it, and I want to get in there someday, even if it's put in Ward 1. So, Elizabeth, other questions on the boundaries of the new Ward 1?
I think that covers it for now.
Okay, I'm good. That leaves Director Rosario. If he has further questions, we've kind of picked and pecked at Ward 2 on from various angles. You have any more?
Well, with the minimal scenario, I'm happy with that, and also with the I'm also amenable to, like I said, in that scenario, also either sharing or giving up Leona Canyon if Ward 4 would like some more open space, just to be equitable. But what I am opposed to is in the map B, where I pick up Release Valley and Pleasant Hill. As a politician, and I'm thinking of board members behind me to incorporate more of Contra Costa County as far as a campaign. It's hard. And so if I prefer map A, just for that reason. So other than that, I'm pretty happy.
Thank you. So I'll jump right in on that, and Director Lane can too. It doesn't make sense to us that Pleasant Hill shift in its entire, it's already all in Ward 6, and it really makes sense to keep it in Ward 6. And there are two of us who are hypersensitive to Contra Costa representation. So that would, that change in map B doesn't make sense to me personally. And Director Lane?
Yeah, and well, in that area that they have added, to I-680, it's not a large area. And it makes them, it helps with the equitable population. So you could campaign in the hills there just nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to the consultants, I think you have we're not taking action, but a sentiment here that Pleasant Hill ought to just stay in Ward 6.
Understood.
Okay, let's do one more round robin, looking at each of us and seeing if there are any further questions. There are a number of areas where they are going to do some more work for us in looking at the various scenarios involving Dublin, Pleasanton, and Fremont and Newark, and the trade-offs that we've identified. I think we've been pretty clear on what those alternates are, and they will do the math and check out those options further for us, and check out the impact on the main staging area and picnic area of Kennedy Grove. Anything else where we're zeroing in some more? Those are the two that stand out for me. Dr. Alvarez?
Yes, thank you, Director Coffey. We have Leona Canyon to look into for Ward 3 and Ward 4.
That's right.
We also have Lake Chapeau to take a look at that for Ward 4. In Ward 3 and Ward 5, the math that you're making reference in terms of Pleasanton being kept within Ward 5, and to see the three alternatives for Ward 3, where we take a look at Newark and Coyote Hills, Ardenwood, as well as Vargas Plateau, in terms of communities of interest, what the options are. In Ward 1 and 7, we're looking at Ward 1 and Ward 7, Kennedy Grove, looking at keeping it whole and adding also the Bay Area Ridge Trail to Ward 1. And in Ward 2, I already spoke about Leona Canyon. In Ward 6, keeping up Pleasant Hill in Ward 6. That's what we have. Eric, is there anything else that we may be missing?
I think the only thing, that was a great summary on it. I think the only thing, and President Coffey, that I had in my notes was Castle Hill, Walnut Creek boundary in Ward 6. But everything else I think was covered.
I think Director Lane was comfortable with that in the end, but we did zero in on it some more. Director Lane?
Yeah, after they were clear that it was inside the boundaries of Walnut Creek, I'm okay with that.
All right. Dr. Alvarez, your summary was vastly better than mine, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. Anything else, or we'll move on and get to our all-important board comments to close the afternoon? Director Alvarez, Director. Yes, Eric.
Just President Coffey, I just want to confirm that our consultants got all those instructions and will come back to us with revised maps and want to know when those would be available for the public and for the board.
Thank you, Eric. I do. The only question I have from that summary is the Lake Chabot. What change did we want to make to map A with regards to Lake Chabot?
I think
I know we talked about it.
Yeah, am I correct that it's seeing if we can move some of the park area that's not populated, correct? And leave it split, but have a little more in 4.
Split it more equitably.
Am I saying that correctly?
We think so.
Well,
I say tentatively.
we, in terms of moving Liana Canyon into Ward 4, we have, really haven't talked about that much, but it seems to me with the director's concern about having more of open space park, that would be significant to have that park, and perhaps would not necessarily need to have a section of Lake Chabot. And we haven't really talked about that, and I'm kind of reluctant to talk about it, but we are talking about making a significant addition to Ward 4.
I think we should, it's worth looking at. Just
I think Director Corbett's going to look at it. Look at the Lake Chabot area. She's raised, and she's going to pursue it with the consultants and her own ability to do street by street, very census tract, at least building block level, which we'll all get to do. Now, I think I need to close the public hearing, but that would move me to asking whether we have anybody attending from the public. I haven't seen any email.
No, President.
And I haven't seen any hands going up. If we could close this,
President Coffey, I just wanted to remind folks that the deliberations and decision points need to be taken place at public meetings of the board of directors before we close the hearing out.
Sure, and we're going to have some individual consultations with the consultants to explore some of these issues. And if you're uncomfortable with that, we'll just do it at the next meeting. All right, so back to no public comments pending. And if we could take down the map and the screen share so I can look around the room. I don't see any hands raised or hands waving at me. So I think we're fair. If council agrees, we can close the public hearing. Okay, I get to do that again. And we will then close the agenda topic and move on, if folks are ready. All right, we are at item number 7, board comments. Who would like to start off? I'll pick on somebody. Director Lane, would you like to start off?
Oh, I love it.
All right, we will go Director Lane and then Director Wieskamp and then Director Eccles.
All right, thank you. Very interesting meeting, I will say. All right, so since our last board meeting, with the assistance of the legislative staff, I've had some discussions with 2 mayors in our area, Mayor Arnrich from Danville and Mayor Hudson from San Ramon. And it was interesting to me how casually they talked about, yes, we went back to Washington in person and we had conversations in person. And one of them was planning to go back for an APTA meeting in person in a couple of weeks. So I think things are changing. That's what I think. Then I made some contacts on Hike the Hill with regard to the Anza Trail. I had an opportunity to be interviewed at Las Trampas by a representative of Save Mount Diablo, who's putting together a video, which was very interesting. And one of the things that was interesting was that we took a little break because there was a cattle drive that the rancher brought cattle down through part of the staging area over the bridge and then into the other section of Las Trampas. And he was on an ATV and there were a couple of horses and plenty of talking among the cattle. So we took a little break and I have never seen that before. So that was interesting. And then I attended Natural and Cultural Resources, which was an interesting meeting this time. And I talked to Dan Keene in getting preparation for our general manager evaluation. Then thank you for all the maps. It got very interesting doing the redistricting. And I have been doing a little bit of hiking. I did at Hidden Lakes in Martinez, Sycamore Valley, and Little Iron Horse Trail hiking. And then I wanted to say thank you to ASD for the Parks and Trails statistics book that they sent to us, because that's one of my favorite things to have on hand. If you go and talk somewhere, you can have correct information for people out of that very helpful book. And that's it.
Thank you. We'll go from Director Lane to Director Wieskamp.
And I want to thank people on this board for being such civilized people. Don't you think it's impressive that we all manage to not get into wrestling contests over these things, but just have a dialogue? So congratulations to all of us. I'm sure staff appreciates that.
They're all still here.
Yes. We had a conversation with Mayor Arnish, Danville, on the 16th, and then again with the Mayor Hudson on the 18th, and this was all about gathering their support for Tasahara Trail, and they both seem enthusiastic. I hadn't seen either one of them for a while, so it was great to get their feedback. They certainly seem enthusiastic about working together, and they feel like they achieve a lot more in working with our valley, the Tri-Valley. It's just, you add all the dollars up in those communities and you've got to have a lot of impact when you go to Washington. They said it, and I think they're absolutely correct. Had an update from Sabrina when I caught her one day. I think that was on the 18th also. She moves around a lot. On the 22nd was the Finance Committee meeting. On the 24th, I had a very interesting conversation with Dan Keene, the facilitator coming up for the evaluation of Sabrina. We know, since he was a former city manager, we know a lot of the same people, including still current Mark Roberts in Livermore, but retiring soon. And I tried to check in with whichever supervisors I could catch. One was Mac McDonald at Coyote Hills, Dumbarton Quarry. He said they were down from January to just 60,000. And he says they're having good success sending cars down to Dumbarton Quarry to park, take the trails from there, and discover the little playground for kids. So it's working out nicely that they get introduced to this new area and maybe consider doing a little camping trip. I thought that was clever. And he mentioned he was headed out to meet with Chris Barton and some other staff members, and they were looking at planting the trail on the Patterson Ranch property. So it's great to see that happening. And then I had a quick conversation with Chris Lyle, who does all of Vasco, but here we were discussing Brushy Peak. He said they have been so busy there that they are parking on that narrow little road coming in, almost down to private property. And he's planning on ordering the memorial oaks next week and digging trenches. Like when you talk about doing something, you're not realize they have to dig trenches, they have to choose the site, look at everything. But he's enthusiastic and it may happen next week. So I'm grateful for all who have supported it. I can tell you there's one thing, anybody who comes out in the future and has more shade at Brushy Peak will be appreciative. Thanks, that's it.
Okay, thank you, Director. We'll turn to Director Eccles and then Director Waspy and Director Rosario.
Great, thank you so much, President Coffey. On February 22nd, I attended the Finance Committee meeting. On the 23rd, I want to thank staff for their update on Jewel Lake. And then also been hearing a lot, both from community members and staff regarding developments on Point Malate, and really appreciate all of the information on that as well. And so I'm going to leave it with that for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Director Waspy?
Thank you. On February 22nd, I attended the Finance Committee meeting. On February 24th, I hiked with two constituents in the Five Canyons Guerin Park area. Just, God, it's beautiful out there. It's amazing. Some of these places we don't even think about, but boy, the Ridge Trail is beautiful. Everything's green and wildflowers are coming already. So it was a great hike and a great lesson for me from these two constituents. On the 24th, I had my one-on-one with the general manager. On the 25th, I met with Dan Keene, the facilitator for our GM evaluation. On February 26th, I attended a community meeting on site at the Hillview Park in Castro Valley. It's a hard park that's interesting for hard. The Hayward Area Recreation District purchased, it's about 17 acres of land that should be a regional parks, but it's right next to Lake Chabot. They're dealing with the issue of having $250 million bond measure passed, bought this beautiful piece of land, but they're a recreation agency. So it was interesting to see the community coming in and suggesting this beautiful green hillside with trees and beautiful stuff they planned out all the baseball fields, all the soccer fields, and all the pickleball courts. And I was amazed, but hard seems to always do it correctly. And interesting interaction with those folks. Also, and I attended the Save Mount Diablo's history seminars that I guess they're starting, and ex-general manager Bob Doyle gave a great history of his perceptions of Save Mount Diablo and how it all started. It was great. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Director Rosario.
All right, thank you. Let's see. I on 215 and then also on 224, I participated in pre-meeting and then a panel discussion for Urban Habitat and their boards and commissions leadership institute, and I joined a panelist from boards and commissions from park districts from Alameda and Contra Costa counties, and just talked about what it means to run for public office and what it takes. So it was very interesting. And then on the 16th, I was part of a panel for Friends of Salsa Creek and their State of the Watershed. And I was joined by Sasha Berliner from the Audubon Forestry and Mateo Garbaletto from UC and Eddie Dunbar, and that was a great panel. And for my part, I just talked about how the increase in Park District visitation has impacted the parks. I just wanted to thank Lisa Baldinger and Ruby Tummer for their assistance in getting some of the data. People were really, really interested in the numbers and the data. And so that was pretty fascinating. But one of the things I learned from Matteo Garbaletto is that, as you know, he does all of the pathogens research. And he says, we have too many trees. And so when we're doing restoration work, definitely look at the number of trees that we want to replace and how we do it, and paying attention to species that we bring in. And a lot of the pathogens that are affecting the non-natives are endemic to themselves, and they were benign, but because of drought conditions, they've turned on themselves. So something about the drought has just, they're eating themselves from the inside out. So it's very interesting discussions. And then on 217 and 224, I attended the Lake Merrick Breakfast Clubs, both interesting. One was, we got to meet Tiffany Ang, who is a advocate for Lincoln Park in City of Oakland, and they're advocating for a new community center. It's just how that park, history of how that park got together, and the community advocacy around it, pretty interesting. And then also the second Lake Merrick Breakfast Club was about Oakland Public Libraries and how they're changing to meet the needs of the community. They really highlighted how they're really getting into bicycle repair shops. And they've actually got a couple of containers, and they're actually teaching kids how to work on their bikes. And then on the 24th, I attended a Living Oakland stakeholders meeting where we're talking about the homeless situation and the elderly. And it's amazing how many people are working on the homeless situation and how to take care of our seniors. And it's encouraging, but it's a daunting task. And I'll be attending the Mayor's Commission on Aging this week, I think. And then I met with Dan Keene, or a moderator for General Manager Evaluation. Very nice conversation. And then my other hat, Friends of Salsa Creek. I led a trail maintenance crew with volunteers in Diamond Canyon. And that's it. Oh, just a comment on from our press releases. I noticed that the Moraga Canyon Bridge Road is open, and I think I was going to call Dan Cunning and see if we can't connect or reopen the section between Bella Vista and the Canyon Bridge, because now that bridge is open, it's that road there is so narrow. It'd be nice to get bikes off of that road. So, and that's it. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director. My turn. On the 18th and 20th of February, I met with first the leadership and then the membership of the East Contra Costa Delta section of the Sierra Club to discuss East Contra Costa land use issues that club is interested in, and some of what's happening with our East County Park system. On the 20th, I attended the Marsh Creek Democratic Club to listen to local issues being discussed concerning Brentwood and Antioch. On the 22nd, I observed your Finance Committee on YouTube. A very good meeting. On the 23rd, I attended the Natural and Cultural Resources Committee, which I thought had a superb agenda this month. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the year based on that work plan. I met with the GM's office, Mary Mattingly, on the 24th to discuss board contingent allocations from, I don't know, this was 1 or 2 years ago, or we were still working on that some. And then on the 24th, I met with the government affairs team to review the the governor's 30 by 30 report and hear their analysis on how it impacts interests of the Park District and my ward in particular, the Marsh Creek State Historic Park, and what impetus there may be added to the 30 by 30 initiative to open that park. On the 24th, I also had an interview with the facilitator, Dan Keene is his name, I recall, and who is facilitating the general manager's evaluation. On the 24th, I joined you, Director Wasby, in attending the Bob Doyle Save Mount Diablo presentation on land use advocacy history and Save Mount Diablo's role in that. Really good discussion from Bob. On the 24th in the evening, I attended an event in Antioch where the mayor and vice mayor were also attending, and I was given the ability to praise their support of the continued preservation of open space in southern Antioch along the Empire Mine Road corridor. On the 25th, I met with our PAC chair, Carlin Obringer, to talk about the PAC agenda, PAC. On the 25th, I attended the Hercules Democratic Club to listen to Congressman John Garamendi speak on his efforts to gain re-election in the newly drawn Congressional District 3, which also now includes much of West and Northern Contra Costa, or will include as of this coming election. Yeah, the significant change in the representation of Contra Costa's congressional delegation.
He met on my back, Jeff,
Yeah.
a few years ago.
That's true. Yeah, he's back big time in Contra Costa County. On the 26th, I attended the Black Diamond Mines Naturalists sponsored, actually conducted by Virginia Delgado Martinez, the Black History Month Cahoots game. And I kind of have to shake my head. Sandmine dude did okay, but could have done better. But it was a good game. It was a great tribute to Black history in the outdoors and nature. On the 28th, trying to read my notes. Well, we had the board planning meeting for this meeting with the general manager and the deputy general manager and the general counsel and Director Lane. And on that evening, I attended and presented on behalf of the board to the PAC's monthly meeting. And the issue I discussed with them is that of mountain biking and natural trails and how that issue is being referred to them from the executive committee. And last, I can just say, well, next to lastly, I spent both of the prior 2 weekends hiking with naturalist Kevin Dixon in Black Diamond Mine and managed to do a tour within Black Diamond of the coal towns. So the first Sunday we did Summersville and Stewartville, which is about a 5-6 mile loop trail. And then this Sunday we did a 5-mile loop trail all around Nortonville, which is on the western side of Black Diamond Mine. So between the 2 weekends, I got 11 and 12 or 12 miles in at Black Diamond and a tour of the 3 coal towns encompassed in that with a deep history, because when you go with a naturalist, you're going to be taking your time and learning the history of the land that surrounds you as you do that hike. So that was a really great experience for me and Mila. So we're going to adjourn, but what I wanted to do in the process of adjourning is talk about what's been on my mind with the news lately. And I asked Brenda if she's still here. I don't know if Brenda's still around, but there were some slides that the Park District has. There's Brenda. I was looking at the screen. I forgot that some of us exist in real life now here, but I'm sorry. But my paternal grandfather emigrated to the United States from the Ukraine. Around 1901, some of his family preceded him and a lot of his family followed him, such that this little town generated a whole bunch of my relatives who ended up in Brooklyn, New York, around the turn of the last century. And at the time, they identified as Russian because it was part of the Russian Empire at the time, but they were from Ukraine. And I grew up understanding that a large part of my heritage was fairly recent Ukrainian. And what that brought to mind in terms of where we are today and affiliated with East Bay Regional Parks District, I've been thinking of Ukraina. And for those of us who've been around a while, we've probably run across it. It's a historic site at Garin Regional Park, the homestead for 43 years, 1872 to 1916, of Ukrainian exile and Russian resistance leader, Father Agapius Honchenko. Did I get that right, Director? Honchenko. He was and his wife were settled in this homestead. There's the house as it appeared, I think around near his death in 1915, that he called Ukraina. When people visited Father Honchenko at Ukraina, they were greeted by the quotation, quote, "Revenge on the wolves that devour the lambs." And after years of being hunted by Tsarist agents around Europe and the United States, including San Francisco, he settled into the Hayward Hills and had his publications smuggled into Russia and Ukraine, advocating Ukrainian nationalism, for social reform of the Russian feudal system, and for social reform within his own church. Among freedom fighters around the world, he had a reputation as a revolutionary for social justice and resistance to the Russian Empire. Sort of sounds like a connection to what's going on in the world today. And we have it right here in Garin Regional Park. In 1999, the site was designated by the state of California as a historic site with the landmark designation, landmark sign, as we see in Brenda's photo here under the bear, the California bear and Ukraina. It's a very nice location. It's a bit obscure and a bit of a hike. As I remember, I haven't been there in about 12 years. But anyway, with some Ukrainian heritage and what's going on here, I feel this really strong connection to this spot and intend on going out there and visiting the gravesite quite quickly. So if anyone wanted to add to that.
Yes, thank you. Well, my only addition is that I've always found this site to be incredible. His story, Honchenko's story, and his wife is amazing. That it's thrilling. I mean, he was captured for talking bad about the country or talking truth about the country, and the Tsarists threw him in jail, and he escaped. And it's a great history. He came over here, and I would never suggest in a public meeting that Hayward would be a great place to hide out. But it was a beautiful place to homestead. And, you know, there is a trail up there. There's not only this monument, but there's also a very, very beautiful gravesite of, I think, of Agapius and Albina, and there's some beautiful pine trees. It's, well, there it is right there in the lower
And there's the
right-hand
dedication.
corner.
Yep.
So it's a very attractive site, and there's also to the right and downhill of the grave sites he had this grotto that he, I guess, he worshiped in, he meditated in, and he enjoyed the incredible view of the South Bay, and it's just gorgeous. And I've been there, but that was years and years ago, and I've tried to go back, but I think dear Ron Mueller, who was smart enough to know that that wasn't a place you wanted to, you wanted to know about it, and maybe you said you saw it, but you don't want it open to the public. So it's, from the last time I tried to get to it, there was so much poison oak that it's totally protected, and will be there for ages without spray paint on it or other accoutrements. So anyway, it's I'm proud to have this park in my ward, and they used to have these celebrations, not often, but at least they were really a big deal with, I think, people coming from the Ukraine, if I'm not mistaken. So I look forward to maybe doing this again in the future.
And on the Garin Park map, it's on the map as the Ukraina Loop Trail. I'm sorry, Ukraina Loop Trail to look for at ebparks.org. So with that, we will close and adjourn the meeting, and our thoughts are with the people of Ukraine. Thank you all.
Thank you. Good meeting.